Now let's talk a little bit about playing against a re-raise. For the most part, if you were playing small ball, you'll be entering a lot of pots, and the majority of those pots, you'll be coming in for 2.5 times the blind. Obviously, you're going to run into various situations where you'll get re-raised either by a premium hand or even sometimes when people just get fed up with the fact that you won't stop raising their blind. Okay. Generally speaking, when you get re-raised, you should just dump your hand unless the situation is just right. Several factors constitute the right kind of situation to take a flop even after being re-raised. Factor number 1, your hand strength. This should be pretty obvious, but if you have a premium hand like aces or kings, not only would you play against a raise, you should usually go ahead and re-raise before the flop. Factor number 2, the re-raise was the minimum. If the blinds are 100, 200, and you come in for 500, while opponent re-raises you to 800, there is simply no circumstance where it would be correct to fold, even if you were certain that your opponent had aces. In fact, if you knew your opponent had aces, it would be well worth calling an additional 300 to try and outflop him. The minimum raise has been more recently coined the nuisance raise, in that it accomplishes very little aside from adding a little bit more money to the pot. It's extremely rare to see an initial raiser fold for the minimum re-raise before the flop. Factor number 3, you have position. Position is power. So if the re-raiser has position on you, you should be less likely to call the raise unless, of course, you have a strong hand. However, if the player who re-raised you is out of position, that can turn a marginal hand into a hand worth calling. For example, let's say you're on a semi-steal with 8-10 of hearts and raised to 500. If the big blind raised you 1,000 more, this isn't a bad opportunity to take a flop in position. Had you been out of position, it would be difficult to justify calling a raise like that. Factor number 4, stack size. This is without a doubt the most important factor aside from hand strength when deciding to play against a raise. Bustum hands like pocket sixes or 7-8 of hearts play better against a raise in deep stack poker than they would if the stacks were smaller. For example, let's say it's the early stages of a tournament and you raise to 150 on the button with 7-8 of hearts, leaving you with 98.50 in chips. Now the small blind decided to re-raise you to a total of 500, and he also started the hand with 10,000 in chips. Not only do you have position, but you also have the type of hand that can hit a home run with the right kind of flop. You should call with the hand and hope to win the pot by either A, hitting your hand, or B, bluffing your opponent by using the board cards that may scare your opponent away. Now imagine you have that same hand, the 7-8 of hearts, only this time the blinds are 1,500, 3,000. You're sitting on 88,000, your opponent in the small blind has 112,000. On the button, you go for the steal and make it 8,000 to go. The small blind raises you to a total of 30,000. Well, in this case, there is no play left. There is no home run to hit. Calling here would commit too high a percentage of your chips to the pot with a bustum type hand. Generally speaking, you shouldn't jeopardize more than 10% of your stack on a bustum type hand. If you are serious about trying to apply a small ball style of poker, you're going to have to get used to being involved in a lot of pots, many of which are pots that you'll get re-raised on. It's very important to keep your composure if that happens more than you like, and don't get away from your strategy by making sloppy calls. If you are having trouble laying down hands like Queen Jack, King 10, or even King Queen to a re-raise, it might be time to take a walk. All of those hands do horribly against a pre-flop re-raise. Avoid them like the plague.